What happens when a beloved television presenter walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly conversation, only to be ambushed by a host with an agenda? It only took 46 seconds from the moment Nick Knowles sat down for the entire atmosphere to turn hostile, setting off a chain reaction that would lead to one of the most shocking exits in Loose Women history. The morning started like any other day at the Loose Women studio. Makeup artists buzzed around backstage. Producers checked their clipboards. The audience filed into their seats, excited to see their favorite daytime show. Nobody knew they were about to witness television history. Nick Knowles arrived at the studio gates just after 9 in the morning. He signed autographs for a few fans waiting outside. He chatted with security. He was relaxed, friendly. I'm completely unaware of what was coming. Nick had been on Loose Women before. He knew the panel. He trusted them. Or at least, he thought he did. Inside his dressing room, Nick went over his talking points with his publicist. They discussed the charity project, the families involved, the upcoming fundraiser. Everything was straightforward. Everything was positive. There was no reason to expect trouble. This should be easy, his publicist said, closing her notebook. Just talk from the heart like you always do. Nick nodded. That is the plan. These families have been through so much. I just want people to know their stories. Meanwhile, in the studio, the Loose Women panel was getting ready. Ruth Langsford reviewed her notes. Nadia Sawalha checked her hair in a compact mirror, and Denise Welch sat in the center chair, scrolling through her phone, a strange expression on her face. One of the producers approached Denise. Just a reminder, we have Nick Knowles coming on to talk about his charity work. Should be a nice, feel-good segment. Denise looked up from her phone. We will see about that. The producer frowned. Is everything okay? Everything is fine, Denise replied with a tight smile. I just think someone needs to ask him some real questions for once. The producer looked uncertain, but did not push further. The show had to start soon. There was no time for complications. Nick Knowles walked into the Loose Women studio that morning with a smile on his face. He was there to talk about his latest charity work, helping to build homes for families in need. The audience clapped warmly as he made his way to the panel. He waved to them, his genuine warmth filling the room. Denise Welch sat in the center chair, flanked by Ruth Langsford and Nadia Sawalha. The lights were bright. The cameras were rolling. Everything seemed normal. Everything looked perfect. But the moment Nick settled into his seat, adjusting his microphone and settling his hands in his lap, something felt off. The energy shifted. The temperature seemed to drop. Denise did not smile back at him. She did not offer the usual warm welcome that guests received. She did not lean in with that friendly, conversational posture. Instead, she leaned forward with her arms crossed tightly across her chest, her expression cold and hard. Her eyes were narrowed. Her jaw was set. It was the look of someone ready for a fight. So Nick, Denise began, her voice sharp and cutting through the studio like a blade. You are here to talk about your charity work. How convenient. How very, very convenient. Nick blinked, caught completely off guard. His smile faltered for just a moment. Sorry, what do you mean by convenient? I am not sure I understand. Well, Denise continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm, it is interesting how you always seem to pop up doing charity work right when you need some good publicity. Almost like clockwork, really. Like someone sat down and planned it all out on a calendar. The audience went quiet. You could hear a pin drop. The atmosphere changed in an instant. Ruth and Nadia exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ruth's eyes widened slightly. Nadia bit her lower lip. They both seemed to realize this was not going to be the pleasant interview they had expected. Nick shifted in his seat, clearly confused by the hostile tone, or trying to understand where this was coming from. I do not do charity work for publicity, Nick replied calmly, keeping his voice steady despite the attack. I do it because I care about helping people. I genuinely care. I have been doing this for years, long before most people even knew who I was." Denise scoffed loudly, a harsh sound that echoed through the studio. "Oh, please. You expect us to believe that? You really expect us to sit here and swallow that line? Every time you have a new show coming out or a project to promote, suddenly you are out there in your hard hat, cameras following you around, photographers snapping pictures. It is all just a performance, a carefully staged performance." Nick's jaw tightened. You could see the muscles working in his face. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he kept his composure. He was not going to lose his cool. Not yet. "That's completely unfair, Denise. Completely unfair and completely untrue. These are real families who need real help. Real people with real problems. I have spent weeks on these building sites, working alongside volunteers, raising money, getting my hands dirty. This is not about me. It has never been about me." "Not about you?" Denise shot back, her voice rising now, getting louder and more aggressive with each word. "Everything is about you, Nick. Everything. You are always the hero, always the good guy, always the one riding in to save the day. But we see right through it. I see right through it. It is all an act," the audience murmured. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others leaned forward, sensing drama. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment, every expression, every uncomfortable second. Ruth tried to interject, her voice gentle but firm. "Denise, I think that is a bit harsh. I really do. Nick has done a lot of good work over the years. A lot of families have benefited from his efforts." Denise turned to Ruth with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, Ruth, don't be naive. Please don't be naive about this. This is how these celebrities operate. This is the game. They use charity as a shield, so no one can criticize them. They wrap themselves in good deeds, so they are untouchable. It is a strategy, a calculated strategy." Ruth looked taken aback. "I do not think that is fair." "Life is not fair," Denise snapped back. Nadia leaned forward now, her voice gentle and kind, trying to diffuse the tension. "Nick, why don't you tell us more about the specific project you are working on right now? I think the audience would love to hear about it." "I know I would. Tell us about the families." Nick took a breath, grateful for the opening, grateful for someone showing him basic human decency. "Thank you, Nadia. I appreciate that. We are currently building homes for 3 families who lost everything in a fire last year. A terrible fire that destroyed their entire apartment building. We have raised over £100,000 through donations, fundraising events, corporate sponsors. The construction is nearly complete. The homes are beautiful, and these families will be moving into their new homes next month, just in time for the holidays." A few people in the audience clapped. It was a beautiful story. A story of hope and community, and people helping people. But before anyone could respond, before anyone could celebrate this achievement, Denise jumped back in, cutting through the positive moment like a knife. "And how much of that money goes to actually building the homes versus how much goes to filming your television special about it?" Denise asked, her voice dripping with accusation. "Because I am curious. I am very curious about the breakdown." The audience gasped. You could feel the shock ripple through the room. Nick's face flushed red. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "Every single penny goes to the families. Every single penny. I am not being paid for this. I am volunteering my time. I am paying my own expenses." "Sure you are," Denise said with a smirk, a cruel twist of her lips. "And I suppose you just happen to have a camera crew following you around for free too." Out of the goodness of their hearts. "The documentary is being made to raise awareness and encourage more donations," Nick explained, his voice strained now, the frustration creeping in despite his best efforts. "That is how charity work operates in the modern world. That is reality. You use your platform to help people. You use your visibility to shine a light on important causes. Denise laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that made several audience members visibly wince. Your platform. Listen to yourself. Just listen to yourself talk. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It is all about your image, your brand, your platform, your name in the headlines. Ruth tried again, her voice stronger now, more insistent. Denise, I really think you are being unfair here. Genuinely unfair. Nick has helped a lot of people over the years. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands. Helped people or helped himself? Denise snapped back, turning on Ruth now with the same aggression she had been directing at Nick. There is a difference, a big difference, and I am just asking which one it really is. Nick stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, the sound echoing through the silent studio. Everyone froze. The studio fell completely silent. You could feel the tension, thick and heavy in the air. Everyone could see the anger in his eyes, the fire burning there, but also the hurt underneath. The deep hurt of someone who had been attacked for trying to do something good. He had come here to talk about something he was passionate about, something that mattered to him deeply, and he was being attacked for it. He was being torn down for trying to build others up. You know what? Nick said quietly, his voice shaking with emotion, but controlled. Every word measured and deliberate. I came here today because I thought this was a platform where we could have honest conversations about important issues. Real issues. Issues that matter to real people. I thought I could talk about these families who have been through hell, absolute hell, and how people can help them. How viewers at home could make a difference. But instead, you have spent the last 5 minutes making baseless accusations, throwing around conspiracy theories, and trying to tear me down for doing something good. Denise leaned back in her chair, arms still crossed tightly, her expression defiant. Oh, here we go. Playing the victim now. Of course, when you cannot defend yourself. Play the victim card. I am not playing anything, Nick said, his voice growing stronger now, more forceful, filled with righteous anger. I am telling you the truth, the honest truth. I have given up my own time, my own money, my own energy to help people who need it. People who have nothing. People who lost everything. And you sit there in your comfortable chair, making your comfortable salary, in your comfortable life, and you dare to question my motives? You dare to suggest I am doing this for attention? The audience began to murmur. Some people were nodding in agreement with Nick. Others looked shocked at the confrontation unfolding before them. A few were taking out their phones, already recording, already thinking about social media. Ruth and Nadia both looked deeply uncomfortable, unsure whether to intervene, while caught between supporting their colleague and supporting what was clearly right. I dare to ask questions that need to be asked, Denise retorted, her voice rising to match his. That is my job. That is what journalists do. We ask the tough questions. We hold people accountable. Your job is to interview people, not to ambush them, Nick fired back, his voice sharp now, cutting. There is a difference between asking tough questions and being needlessly cruel. There is a difference between journalism and bullying. And what you are doing right now, what you have been doing since the moment I sat down, is bullying. Pure and simple. Cruel? Denise laughed again, but this time it sounded forced, hollow. Oh, please, if you cannot handle a few tough questions, if you cannot defend your own actions, maybe you should not be on television. Maybe you should not be putting yourself out there. Nick shook his head slowly, deliberately, his expression one of profound disappointment. This is not about handling tough questions. I have answered tough questions before. I have been interviewed hundreds of times. I have faced criticism. I have dealt with skepticism. But this, what you are doing right now, this is not about seeking truth. This is about you trying to create drama where there is none. You want a story. You want controversy. You want conflict. You want ratings. You want people talking about loose women tomorrow morning. Well, congratulations, Denise. You got it. You definitely got it. He started to remove his microphone, his fingers working quickly at the small clip. The floor manager stepped forward hesitantly, unsure what to do, looking toward the control booth for guidance. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this unprecedented moment. This did not happen on daytime television. Guests did not walk off. Not like this. "What are you doing?" Denise asked, sitting up straighter now, leaning forward, a hint of panic creeping into her voice for the first time. "Where are you going?" "I am leaving," Nick said simply, his voice calm now, resolved. "I am not going to sit here and be insulted for trying to do something good. I am not going to give you the satisfaction. These families deserve better than this circus. They deserve respect. They deserve to have their stories told with dignity. And clearly, that is not going to happen here today." Ruth reached out toward him, her hand extended, her voice pleading. "Nick, please, wait. Maybe we can start over. Maybe we can reset and talk about the project properly." Nick looked at Ruth, and his expression softened slightly. You could see the respect he had for her. "Ruth, you are a good person. I know that. I have always known that. But I cannot stay here. I will not stay here. I cannot give this kind of behavior a platform. I cannot sit here and pretend this is okay when it is not." Nadia nodded, her eyes sympathetic, glistening with unshed tears. "We understand, Nick. I'm sorry it went this way. I am truly sorry. You did not deserve this." "I am not sorry," Denise interjected, her voice hard, stubborn, refusing to back down even now. "If he cannot handle the heat, he should get out of the kitchen. If he cannot defend his own actions, that says everything we need to know." Nick turned to face Denise one last time, making direct eye contact, when holding her gaze. "You know what the difference is between us, Denise? The real difference? I spend my time trying to build things, build homes, build lives, build hope, build communities. You spend your time trying to tear things down, tear people down, tear their work down, tear their intentions down. I hope that works out for you. I really do. I hope when you go home tonight and look at yourself in the mirror, you feel good about what you did here today." The silence that followed was deafening. Absolute deafening silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nick unclipped his microphone completely and handed it carefully to the floor manager, who took it with trembling hands. He straightened his jacket. He took one last look at the audience, many of whom were now on their feet, some clapping, some just staring in shock. Then he walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the quiet studio, without looking back, without hesitation. The cameras followed him until he disappeared through the studio doors, the heavy doors swinging shut behind him with a definitive thud. Denise tried to regain control, tried to assert her authority, tried to make it seem like this was all part of the plan. Well, that was dramatic. Clearly some people cannot handle honest journalism. Clearly some people are not ready for real questions. But Ruth was not having it. Not anymore. "Denise, that was not journalism. That was not asking tough questions. That was an attack. That was personal. That was mean." "Oh, come on, Ruth," Denise said, waving her hand dismissively, trying to brush it off. "Do not be so sensitive." "No, I am serious," Ruth continued, her voice firm now, firmer than anyone had heard it in a long time. "Nick came here to talk about helping families who lost their homes in a fire. Families with children. Families with nothing. And you turned it into some kind of interrogation about his motives, like he is some kind of criminal. That was unfair. That was unprofessional. And frankly, that was beneath you." Nadia nodded vigorously in agreement. "I have to say, I agree with Ruth completely. Nick has been doing charity work for years. Many, many years. Long before he was as famous as he is now. Long before most people knew his name, To suggest it is all just for publicity, to suggest he does not genuinely care, that is really harsh. That is really unfair. And it is not true. Denise looked between them, her face flushing now, clearly frustrated that her co-hosts were not backing her up, that they were turning on her on live television. I was just asking the questions that people at home are thinking. Someone had to ask them. Were you? Ruth challenged, her eyebrows raised. Or were you just trying to create a moment? Because it certainly felt like the latter. It felt like you had already decided to attack him before he even sat down. Like you had an agenda. The audience began to applaud, louder now, supporting Ruth's stance, agreeing with her assessment. Some people were standing. Some people were shouting their agreement. Denise's face flushed deeper, turning red. She was not used to being called out like this, especially not on air, especially not in front of millions of viewers. I stand by what I said, Denise insisted, her jaw set, her voice defiant. Celebrities use charity work for their image all the time. War all the time. That is just a fact. That is just reality. Someone needs to call it out. Maybe some do, Nadia said carefully, choosing her words deliberately. Maybe some celebrities do use charity as a publicity tool. I am not saying that never happens. But Nick is not one of them. Nick is not like that. I have worked with him before. I have seen the work he does when the cameras are not around, when nobody is watching, when there is no benefit to him. He genuinely cares. He genuinely wants to help people. You are being naive, Denise muttered, looking down at her notes, refusing to make eye contact now. No, Ruth said firmly, her voice like steel. You are being cynical. There is a difference between being a tough interviewer and being mean-spirited. What you did just now crossed that line. Way crossed that line. And you know it. The control room was frantically trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Producers shouting into headsets. Directors pointing at monitors. Assistants running back and forth. The producers had not expected this. They had expected a pleasant chat about charity work. Maybe some lighthearted banter. Certainly nothing controversial. They certainly had not expected Nick to walk off. They had never seen anything like this happen on the show before. And they definitely had not expected Ruth and Nadia to turn on Denise on live television, calling her out in front of millions of viewers. Denise tried to change the subject, to move past this uncomfortable moment. Let's move on to our next topic. We have a lot to get through today. But Ruth was not finished. She had more to say. Before we move on, I think we owe Nick an apology. Or at least you do, Denise. You owe him an apology. I am not apologizing for doing my job, Denise snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. I will not apologize for asking questions. Then maybe you need to reconsider what you think your job is, Ruth replied coolly, her voice like ice. Because what you just did, that was not journalism. That was a personal attack, and everyone watching knows it. The tension on the panel was thick enough to cut with a knife. You could almost see it hanging in the air. Nadia looked down at her notes, clearly uncomfortable, wishing she was anywhere else. The audience was completely silent now, barely breathing, watching this conflict unfold in real time, watching the panel tear itself apart. Denise turned to the camera, trying desperately to take back control, yet to assert her authority. We will be right back after this break. Stay with us. As soon as they cut to commercial, as soon as the red lights on the cameras went dark, Denise stood up abruptly and stormed off the set, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. She did not look at anyone. She did not say anything. She just left. Ruth and Nadia remained seated, both looking shaken by what had just happened, both processing the confrontation. One of the producers rushed over, clipboard in hand, panic written all over his face. What just happened out there? What are we supposed to do now? Ruth shook her head slowly. Denise went too far. Way too far. She crossed a line. Nick is a good man, Nadia added quietly, her voice thick with emotion. He did not deserve that. Nobody deserves to be treated like that. The producer looked between them, uncertain. Should we apologize on air? Should we say something? That is up to Denise, Ruth said firmly. But if she does not apologize, I will make sure everyone knows where I stand on this. Backstage, in the quiet corridor away from the lights and cameras, Nick was already gathering his things from his dressing room. His hands were shaking slightly as he packed his bag. The adrenaline was still coursing through his body. A production assistant tried to stop him, reaching out tentatively. "Mr. Knowles, please. Maybe we can sort this out. Maybe you can come back after the break and we can try again." Nick smiled sadly, a tired smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "There is nothing to sort out. I said what I needed to say. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it means walking away. Especially if it means walking away. But," the assistant started, clearly upset, clearly not knowing what to do. Nick put a gentle hand on her shoulder, looking her in the eyes. "It is okay, really. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. But I cannot go back out there. Not after that. Not after being treated like that. I have to have some self-respect." He walked out of the studio and into the street. The fresh air hit his face, cool and clean after the hot, stuffy studio. He felt angry. Yes, the anger was still there, burning in his chest. But he also felt relieved, deeply relieved. He had stood up for himself. He had defended the work that mattered to him. He had not let someone else control the narrative. He had not let Denise make him into the villain. He had maintained his dignity. A few fans were waiting outside. Having heard what happened, having seen it on their phones, the clip already spreading across social media, they approached him cautiously. "Nick, are you okay?" one woman asked, concern in her voice. Nick nodded, managing a real smile this time. "I'm fine. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it." "That was really brave," a young man said. "What you did in there, standing up to her like that." "I just could not sit there and let her attack me for trying to help people," Nick explained. "There has to be a line somewhere." "Well, we support you," the woman said. "We know you are one of the good ones." Nick felt his throat tighten with emotion. These were the people who mattered. These were the people who understood. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Back in the studio, the show came back from commercial break. The tension was still palpable, still hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Denise returned to her seat, but the energy had completely changed. The atmosphere was different. Everything felt wrong. Ruth and Nadia both looked stern, their expressions hard. The audience was restless, shifting in their seats, whispering to each other. Denise tried to act like nothing had happened, tried to pretend everything was normal. "Welcome back. Now, our next guest is..." But Ruth interrupted her, not letting her just move on. "Actually, before we continue, I want to address what just happened. I need to address it. I want to make it clear to our viewers that what Denise said to Nick Knowles does not represent the views of everyone on this panel. It does not represent my views. Nick is a good man who does good work, and he did not deserve to be treated that way. He deserved respect, and he did not get it." The audience erupted in applause, louder this time, sustained, and genuine. Some people were standing now, clapping hard, showing their support. Denise's face went pale, then red again. She had completely lost control of her own show. The show she was supposed to be hosting. The show she was supposed to be leading. Nadia joined in, her voice clear and strong. "I agree completely with Ruth. Nick has been a friend to this show for years. Many years. He has always been professional, always been kind, always been generous with his time. And today, he was ambushed, attacked. That is not okay. That is not how we should treat our guests. That is not who we are." Denise tried to defend herself one more time, tried to justify her actions. As I was just asking questions. Hard questions. That is what I do. No, Ruth said firmly, not backing down. You were attacking him. There is a difference, and you know it. You know the difference. We all know the difference. The audience knows the difference. And Nick certainly knew the difference. The show continued, but the damage was done. The wound was open. The atmosphere remained tense. Every time Denise tried to move to a new topic, there was an underlying current of discomfort, an awkwardness that could not be hidden or smoothed over. The audience had seen what happened. They had witnessed it with their own eyes. They had seen Nick defend himself with dignity and grace. They had seen Denise's cruelty, her aggression, her refusal to show basic human kindness. And they had seen Ruth and Nadia stand up for what was right, even when it meant going against their colleague. When the show finally ended, when the cameras finally stopped rolling, Denise left immediately without speaking to anyone. Ruth and Nadia stayed behind, talking quietly with producers, expressing their concerns, making their positions clear. We cannot treat people like that, Ruth said firmly. We just cannot. This is supposed to be a show about women supporting women, about having real conversations, about building people up, not tearing them down. I agree, Nadia said. What happened today cannot happen again. It just cannot. The producers nodded, taking notes, promising to review the footage, promising to have conversations with Denise, promising to make changes. But everyone knew that the real damage could not be undone. What happened had happened. It was out there now. The world had seen it. Outside the studio, Nick sat in his car for a moment before driving away. He thought about the three families waiting for their new homes, the ones with children who had lost their toys and their clothes and their beds in the fire, the ones who had been living in temporary housing for months, the ones whose lives he was trying to help rebuild. He thought about the volunteers who had given their time and their effort to help, the construction workers who had donated their labor, the businesses that had contributed materials, the ordinary people who had sent in donations, £5 here, £10 there, because they wanted to help, because they cared. He thought about all of that, and he realized that what happened on that show did not matter. Not really. It was noise. It was drama. It was television nonsense. What mattered were those families. What mattered was the work. What mattered was making a real difference in real lives. That was what made Nick Knowles the good guy. Not because he was perfect. He was not perfect. Nobody is perfect. Not because he never got angry. He had gotten angry today. He had let his frustration show. But because even in his anger, even in his hurt, even when he was being attacked and belittled, he kept his focus on what truly mattered. He kept his dignity intact. He stood up for himself without tearing anyone else down. He defended his work without making it about ego or pride. He walked away with his head held high. And that is something no amount of hostile questioning, no amount of cynical accusations, no amount of television drama could ever take away from him. That integrity, that authenticity, that genuine care for other people, that is what made him who he was. That is what made him different. That is what made him someone worth supporting, worth believing in, worth standing up for. The world needs more people like Nick Knowles, people who do the right thing even when it is hard, people who help others even when nobody is watching, people who stand up for themselves while still treating others with respect, people who build instead of destroy, people who give instead of take, people who care instead of criticize. That morning started like any other day, but by the time it ended, everything had changed. A television moment that was supposed to be about charity and hope had turned into a confrontation about integrity and character. And when the dust settled, when all the shouting stopped, when all the drama faded away, And one thing was crystal clear to everyone who watched. Nick Knowles was the good guy, and no amount of hostility from Denise Welch could change that fundamental truth.